This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here he is, the host of the podcast, AWR Hawkins.
Welcome to Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart News podcast focused on guns, gun rights, Second Amendment. So good to be with you and to be here to talk to you about freedom. And that's what we always summarize, guns, gun rights, Second Amendment. That's the banner we summarize them under, because an armed citizen is a free citizen. It's that simple. Folks, there's a lot of news to sum up this week, a lot. Before I get to it, I want to mention I had an email from Thomas Williams, and I don't know what part of the country he's in, but he asked me about a reading list for things to read for a deeper understanding of the Second Amendment, and even more than that, a deeper understanding of the individual rights that the Second Amendment protects. And I mentioned 5 things to him, which are, to be honest with you, these are starters, but they're also, if you're only going to read 5 things, these are the 5 things you should read. I want to throw them out to you. Number 1, I've said before, and you could read this probably in 15 minutes, Federalist 46. Number 2, Federalist 84. Federalist 84 is extremely important because it shows that the right to keep and bear arms was such an evident right, such a self-evident right, that some of the founders didn't even believe it needed an amendment to protect it. It's too evident. And that comes clear in Federalist 84. Joyce Malcolm's To Keep and Bear Arms. That's a book you need. Joyce Malcolm, To Keep and Bear Arms. Stephen Halbrook, The Founders' Second Amendment. Stephen Halbrook, The Founders' Second Amendment. And Russell Kirk, The American Cause. All right? Those are five things to read that should really give you a solid foundation. And really, after you read those 5, you will have an understanding of the way our founders thought, and of the fact that, and I say fact, that the right to keep and bear arms not only predates America, it predates any civilization you can mention, because it is part of humanity, period. In the news this week, we had Huntress Tess Thompson Talley. She posted a photo of her with a giraffe that she shot and killed. That's it. Shot it in Africa. Of course, what that means is that the African government had selected that giraffe as one of the animals that needed to be removed. That's how that works, by the way, in case you don't know it. You don't just get to go down there and go, wow, that looks like a fun animal to shoot. I'm going to shoot it. Go, give me my gun. Doesn't work like that. You're told, you're taken with a guide, but that guide knows what can and can't be shot, what needs to be shot. And so when you see an animal that has been killed, taking that animal out was part of a conservation plan that they knew by removing that animal and other animals like it, they contribute to a thriving population of whatever that particular breed or species is. So she posts a picture of her with this giraffe, and the Looney Tunes lose it. The hippies and freaks come out. It's crazy, folks. And some of these people who came out are actors and actresses. The things she is called are unbelievable. Her personal information is given out. The name of her husband is given out. The town they live in, with a little wink and nod tweets that say, hey, if you bump into them, let them know that you don't appreciate her murdering animals. Look, folks, number 1, this might not sit well with a couple of you, but if it doesn't, then you need the education anyway. Here we go. You can kill an animal, but you can only murder a moral creature. And the only moral creature on this earth is a human. This is part of the leftist move, though. They confuse terms on purpose. See, it's easy to pass laws against hunting if killing a deer is murder. Easy to pass laws against hunting if killing a giraffe is murder. If killing an elephant is murder. If killing a lion is murder. But it's not. Now, killing your neighbor, that's murder. And that's why for killing your neighbor, The law requires in many states that you will be put to death, because the only thing that can recompense for for a life taken is another life. So don't get sloppy with your terminology. Now here's the good news. Huntress, Tally, she didn't bend at all. She goes, look, hey, everybody's entitled to their opinion. You don't like hunting? That's great. But she did note, and she's correct, the kind of vitriol spewed at her would never be spewed at her were not hunting involved. But these freaks on the left, folks, golly, it is unbelievable. The San Francisco Chronicle did us a favor this week. Now, you never thought I'd say that, did you? The San Francisco Chronicle did the pro-gun community a favor this week. What they did is they tried to show over the last 25 years how much gun control California has passed. And then they cried because California has led the way in gun control, while the rest of the country has actually loosened their gun laws in many cases. Now, what the Chronicle did without knowing it is they told us all of the gun control that has failed in California. That's what they did. They basically showed us all the gun control that has failed, such as an assault weapons ban, the registration requirements in the state, the gun confiscation requirements in the state, the requirement to get a firearm safety certificate from the state before buying a gun, the 10-day waiting period for a gun purchase in the state, the good cause requirement for a concealed carry permit, the ban on campus carry, the ban on teachers carrying a gun for self-defense K through 12. On and on and on I could go. All of their gun controls have failed. They have failed. 25 years of gun control, starting in 1993. 23 years into it, they had the San Bernardino attack, December 2nd, 2015. A year before that, they had the Santa Barbara attack, May 23rd, 2014. After both of those, October 8th, 2016, they had the 2 police officers ambushed and killed in Palm Springs. On and on and on I can go. More recently, had the YouTube headquarters shooting, had the Yountville Veterans Home attack, 3 people killed. I mean, I could keep going. Not only that, not only does it not work, it puts the law-abiding citizen in a position of defenselessness, which is inhumane. You want to talk about inhumanity? Forget what the freaks and hippies say about hunters. You want to talk about inhumanity? Inhumanity is forcing innocent Americans to be defenseless. That is inhumanity. Folks, we had a white feminist this week that completely lost it because she passed a white BMW that a black man was driving, and it had an NRA sticker on it. A black man with an NRA sticker. And it also had a Gadsden flag on it. Don't tread on me. What? She didn't know what to do. So she took to Twitter, couldn't believe it. Now, she apparently doesn't know that black unemployment is at a historic low, literally historic low under President Trump. She doesn't know that. She might not be bright enough to know. I'm being serious. From some of her statements, she might not be very bright. But anyway, her name's Kimberly Johnson. She tweeted about this, and she said she can't believe people of color would support somebody like this, like Donald Trump. And why would they care about gun rights? I guess she also missed that during the last 3 to 4 years, one of the surging demographics for concealed carry is the black community. And that's particularly true for black women. You don't believe me? Google black women, the plus sign, gun ownership, the plus sign, Breitbart. See what you come up with. You can read it for yourself. All right? Now, this woman didn't. So she had to delete her tweets because the backlash she faced was so great. She literally had to delete her tweets. And then she put out tweets trying to explain the tweets she had deleted. And she took another beating on Twitter. Another one. Someone finally made the point that needed to be made. Basically, the people that think like Kimberly Johnson, this white feminist, people that think like that believe all blacks, they just wake up and go, what's the black thing to do? In other words, they're not capable of thinking for themselves. That's the kind of viewpoint that Kimberly Johnson and her crew push, whether whether intentionally or not. And someone responded to her and goes, look, blacks don't just do what blacks do. They support the party they want to support. And I'm going to tell you something, that's increasingly so. Those of you who are on Twitter a lot, you'll notice the walk away movement is not small. People are walking away from the Democrat plantation. Blacks are tired of being told to stay in their place. They're tired of Democrats telling them, stay in your place. Be a good Democrat. They're tired of it. And they should be. After all, it was the Democrats who owned the slaves in the Confederacy. Confederacy was a Democrat mechanism. The Democrats owned the slaves in the South. The Democrats went to war with the Republicans in the Civil War. Republicans were in the North. I have to say that, those of you who may have been educated by people who had to have public school curriculum. The Republicans were in the North. The Democrats were in the South. One of the things that they fought over was slavery. The Democrats were fighting to keep their slaves. Now, they lost. After the Civil War, they used Jim Crow laws, black codes, the Ku Klux Klan, anything they could use to keep blacks in line. Now, listen, you just be a good Democrat. They did that for years, for over a century. And what's happening now? A lot of black Americans are walking away because they realize the Democrats don't have any intention of making their lives better. None. They just need people to vote for them. Come over to the Republican Party, you look at Donald Trump, what's he doing? I'm going to be honest with you. He's not trying to make your life better for you. That's important. But he's trying to get government out of the way so that you have the freedom to make your life better and pursue the avenues you want to pursue. True freedom. That's what he's doing. And a lot of folks are crossing over because of it. Folks, you're listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. We're going to be back after the break, and I'm going to have my guest with me, Kurt Schlichter. I'm going to tell you right now, I already know just thinking about the guy. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. Kurt loves freedom, and he will tell you without mincing any words that he loves freedom, and he loves firearms, and he loves this country. So you're listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. We'll be back right after this.
Breitbart News Daily with Alex Marlow.
Jeannie in Pennsylvania.
I think he's gotten away from what we really hired him to do, which is draining the swamp. If you look at the real picture of draining a swamp, you go in and you take all the water out of it. What does it leave? It leaves the gunk. He cannot get rid of the gunk. We have to get rid of the gunk. Everything he's doing, he's lowering the water so we can see who needs to go. The only way they can go is if we vote them out.
Breitbart News Daily, weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is AWR Hawkins.
Folks, welcome back to Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart News podcast. We covered a lot of news in the first segment, and I told you we'd have a great guest. Our guest this segment is Kurt Schlichter. Kurt, you may have seen him on Fox News. If not, you may have read his columns on Town Hall. If not, you may have read some of his books. And if you didn't do that, you may know that he's an attorney. And if that's not the case, you may read him on Twitter and know that he loves guns. And bingo, that's why I follow him. And I love his courage, and he's in your face when it comes to guns and freedom. Kurt, thanks for making time to be with us.
Well, thanks for having me. Of course, you know, I was drawn into this whole business by Andrew Breitbart personally, and I take that as a great compliment that Andrew thought I might have something to say, and I endeavor to honor his memory by keeping up the fight. And I appreciate you doing that, too.
I'm just going to say something, Kurt. You exhibit or exemplify the kind of fight. You know, before Andrew, if you were conservative and they tried to cower you in the corner, what'd you do? Unless you were Ronald Reagan. Unless you were Reagan, you cowered. And Andrew said, no, we're not going to do that. And he didn't say it in so many words. He just refused to cower. I see that same spirit alive in you, especially the way you operate on Twitter. So I appreciate that about you, too.
Well, one of the things about Andrew is he recognized that our opponents have a glass jaw. Okay, one good blow and they go down. The simple fact is most of them are punks and bullies, and bullies aren't there for a stand-up fight.
Right.
They're there to find the weak. They're there to find the uncommitted, the squishy. And when you simply stand up and say, no, I demand my rights as a human being and as an American, and if you want to take them, you're going to have to take them. So suit up, hipster, and let's do this thing.
That's it. Suit up. Hey, I left one thing out, folks. It's very important. Kurt is also a retired Army colonel, and appreciate your service, Kurt. I just want to throw that in there. Thank you for
I was a colonel. I didn't do anything. All the troops did stuff. I just tried to look busy.
Well, I just appreciate it. So let's talk guns for a minute. I know, as I say, on Twitter quite often someone can catch you talking about freedom, talking about guns, talking about refusal to give them up. Common themes here. But talk to us a little bit about guns. You know, you have a lot of military experience. You have a love for firearms. What's a gun that you love to keep near your person for self-defense?
Well, I live in California, so I'm not even sure I'm allowed to do that. But, in the military...
Well, pretend you were in Oklahoma. If you were in Oklahoma...
you mean in America?
In America, what would you keep with you?
Good Lord. There's so many choices. I'd like... and I know we're going to talk about my books later, but I kind of bring that over into my books. I'm a 1911 kind of guy.
Right.
I like a big, heavy gun, a substantial weapon, one that makes a point. Because if you make a point, maybe you never have to use it. I spent 27 years in the military, never had to shoot anybody. I'm pretty happy about that. But I would much rather have a weapon that convinces somebody that this is a bad idea and they ought to do the right thing and go away. But if it push comes to shove, a 230 grain hollow point cartridge, it's probably going to do the job.
Right. Well, another thing for that 1911, and not just the 1911, but I'm not trying to mess you up, Kurt. I'm going to go with wheel guns too.
Interesting.
I love the old wheel guns for that same substantial feel. I love the weight. Like when you roll over at night, if something goes boom in the night, when you grab that gun, you feel like I've got something here I can protect myself with. This is a weapon,
my expertise is not wheel guns, but I've been thinking a lot about a 357.
Right.
A good, it's going to fire every single time. It's going to hit what you aim at. It's going to do the job if you ever come to the circumstance where you have to use it. And if you have to go up somebody's head with it to convince them to behave, you got a couple pounds in your hand. So I'm kind of thinking, that might be one of my next purchases.
Right on. And there are plenty to choose from. I'm going to tell you, the Kimber K6S is next level. It is a very heavy, I shouldn't say very heavy, that's negative. It is heavier than most carry snubbies, but that weight keeps the 357 from kicking too bad. You can get second shot acquisition pretty easy. So I love that Kimber. But anyway, look, let me ask you this, Kurt. We've got freedom on the line so many times, especially the Democrats. They never relent. When you think about firearms in general and the right to keep and bear arms, I should say, in general, explain to us the importance. How integral is that right as far as our freedom goes? Can we have freedom without guns? Is it possible?
You absolutely can't. And that's so critical. And I discuss it a lot on Twitter. I discussed it with James Woods today, who I'm not sure quite understood exactly where I was coming from. When I say, so often on Twitter, I'll say buy guns and ammunition. And a lot of liberals pretend that's a threat or pretend that's bellicose. It's exactly the opposite. The founders knew how important it was to have decentralized power available to American citizens. Firearms are power. They are a tool that breaks the monopoly on violence that you see in other countries, like Venezuela, which banned guns. But, look at Britain. Look at Great Britain. They banned weapons. Now they're banning jokes. You can literally be placed in jail for saying something in Great Britain.
Right.
No human endeavor is safe from corruption.
Right.
No human endeavor is safe from potential for exploitation. Tyranny is always right around the corner. That's simply human nature. I advocate checks and balances. I advocate checks and balances in the government, just like the founders said. 3 branches of government, co-equal, and they can cancel each other out.
Right.
But the people need a balance and a check too.
Right.
And that's firearms distributed through the citizenry, through trained citizens who stand ready to defend themselves, their families, their community, and their constitution. That is not bellicose. That is not aggressive. It is the ultimate in defensive. It is the ultimate in deterrence. I don't want to fight. You know my record. I spent time in the ruins of a civil war where people were murdering each other because they didn't like their politics and their race and their religion. And we in the military had to go in and clean that mess up.
Right.
I've seen what happens when it all breaks down. I don't want to break down. I want a citizenry that's ready to establish order. I'm also a guy who spent 3 weeks on the riots in Los Angeles. I was called up with the National Guard. I was at an inner city unit, and we went all through those riots. I have seen it with my own eyes. I can give you my sworn testimony of what happens when it all falls apart. The ultimate protection for our society is engaged, educated citizens who are able to participate in the protection of their society.
That's it. You know, Kurt, I used to teach some in the university. I have a PhD in military history, and I would teach a lot of what in different words, but, you know, everybody wants to say, well, the legislative branch is the check on the executive. The executive is a check on the legislative. The judicial is a check on both, and they always leave out that fourth check that you've mentioned, the people.
Yes.
Without the people, there is no ultimate check, and without the people. See, people read the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, the Third, the Fourth, and so on. They rarely spend time on the 10th, but if they did, when they read the 10th and it talked about those powers being reserved to the states, and then there's a comma, or to the people, and that is explicitly stated because the people are the ultimate check on their own government. Government only has power because the people loan it to them.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
it.
What does it say about an elite that is terrified that ordinary citizens will collectively, by their individual ownership of firearms, maintain a check on their power? They're saying they don't want their power check. These guys, they don't care if some lunatic walks into a schoolyard and opens fire. If they cared, they would allow security measures and guards and armed teachers. They care that we have a veto over their Venezuela dreams.
Right. That's it. You've hit.
And all you have to do is listen to him. Look, I love social media. This is one of the reasons Andrew is so great. He understood what social media could do. He actually, a lot of people don't know, he was one of the guys who helped do the technological stuff behind Huffington Post. And you would think, well, gosh, why would Andrew do something for something so liberal? And Andrew said, well, the answer's obvious. I want them to say what they really think, and Twitter does that. I get death threats. I get told I'll be. You're going to pay. We're going to get you. You know, you have no right to speak. You should be locked up. I get reporters telling me I shouldn't be able to say things. It's really amazing what these people think, and it just reinforces the fact that we cannot let people like that have a monopoly on force in our society.
Well, you know something that made your point. You remember under Obama in the latter part of his administration, the Iran freedom fighters. They were. I respect them. Don't get me wrong, but they were feckless because they didn't have arms.
Yeah,
they were feckless. I mean, they voiced their opinion, but unlike us, their First Amendment rights weren't backed by Second Amendment rights. And so,
exactly.
I mean, and people just have to see that. And the second thing I would say is, and I always say that to this crowd right here, Kurt, but folks need to read Federalist 46. If you doubt anything Kurt has said to this point, read James Madison telling you that the great advantage Americans have over the citizens of any other country is the fact that they're armed, that they can band together to repel the government should the government overflow its boundaries. I mean,
this is nothing new.
Yeah,
this isn't new stuff. I'm just saying, let's fulfill the founders' vision. This is part of the package.
Right.
Stripping away the citizenry's ability to act is completely contrary to what the founders said. And the Constitution doesn't work if you treat it like a cafeteria where you only pick and choose certain parts.
And last question for you before we switch topics, Kurt. Last question here. You know, Thomas Jefferson wrote about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And, of course, those are overarching themes that were fleshed out in the Bill of Rights. But life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Am I wrong? Those three things cannot exist if we're not armed. Am I correct?
They can't. Because and how do I know? Because I know history and I have personal experience. Look, human beings are imperfect creatures. And and contrary to what leftists say, they are not perfectible. Will always be bad people. There will always be corrupt people. There will always be greedy people. This is why the founders were so brilliant that they created a series of checks and balances and created the freest system, the one that gives the most human freedom, most justice in the history of mankind. I keep hearing these liberals say, "Oh, you just want a civil war, blah blah blah." No. That's absolutely wrong. What I want is the Constitution to be fulfilled, and that vision of due process and the ability of the people to have a voice in their own governance, and the rights of all people to be that were endowed by their creator, not by some government official, be protected and respected. Right. That's what I want.
Right. You said something a while ago.
Oh, and I won't accept any less.
You shouldn't. You said something a while ago. I'm not changing the subject, but it was just so important. You talked about how you said these people who are pro-gun control, they really don't care that someone walks in and the shooting happens. Their goal is otherwise. Their goal is just to get the guns. Here's something that I think is very crucial. These shootings at schools and other places happen because of gun control. Because these places are gun-free zones, because these are places where the security necessary to keep them safe is denied. I mean, it feeds on itself. They deny the security. It keeps alive an area where innocent people can be gunned down and there's nothing they can do to stop it. And I think the answer for that is to get rid of that gun control. With whether it's armed teachers, whether it's professional security, whatever. We've got to fix that, Kurt. And just wishing that people will be good, as you've said, it's not going to fix it because people aren't good. People are not good.
They are not always good by nature. That is absolutely true. And to deny the ability to protect yourself is inexcusable. And they're doing it because they don't want the system that the founders had in place. They want it unbalanced. They want us disarmed. They want us vulnerable. And they're willing to exploit the murder of kids. They're willing to allow kids to be left unprotected.
Yeah, I mean, it is a shame that they leave those schools wide open. I'll just say it that way. It's a shame. Kurt, I want to shift a little bit. I want to talk about your books. I'm afraid if we don't make a hard shift here, we're never going to get to them. So talk to us about your books. I know some of what you're writing are novels, or you have written novels, and you're working on one now. And you just fill us in. Tell my listeners what it is about your books that would be attractive to them, because I think they're the kind of people who would be readers of your books.
Well, I think that they are the kind of people who buy my books. I've got two kinds, really. I've got the nonfiction ones, which I tend to go through traditional publishers, back in New York with all the fancy stuff. I've got one called Militant Normals. It's coming out in October. If you're a fan of my town hall columns or my Twitter column, you're going to love this because I could be FCC non-compliant. And I talk about how normal Americans basically said, oh, hell no, we're done with this. We are not going to elect this horrible, venal, awful woman. We're going to take a chance on the most unlikely guy imaginable, Donald Trump. A New York billionaire who'd been a registered Democrat. How could he ever speak for us? And yet he has. So Militant Normals, which is available for pre-order, I think people like it. It's got some... it's got some good blurbs from people like Selena Zito, David Limbaugh, Glenn Reynolds, Cam Edwards from NRA News has done it. So I think they'd like it. But the stuff I'm working on right now, I also do through Amazon action novels. I mean, if you go on an airplane, you fly, you're flying someplace, you want to read something that's fun and fast. Well, I write, essentially spy novels, and I kind of do it the way Andrew Breitbart said. Write your message, but do the work well. Write a good novel. Write something that's funny and fast and exciting. My first one was People's Republic. The second was Indian Country. People's Republic introduces this world, our world, in about 10 years when America has broken up into red and blue. And you have a red operator who's got to go into blue America. And you get to see what America would be like if we weren't around to stop the liberals.
Right.
It's got a lot of action, but it's also, a little bit scary sometimes. Indian countries, the follow-up. I wrote that in large part because I was sick of these, hipster barista doofuses who don't know which end of a gun goes bang, telling me, oh, well, an armed citizenry won't matter because the government has tanks.
Right.
And, being, a graduate of the War College, having, deployed a few times, I kind of disagreed, and I want to write about, using the same character, same scenario, about what might happen if Americans were forced to defend themselves against a government that essentially wanted to take all their rights.
Right.
And they've both been pretty successful. I'm writing the third one now. I was writing it as you called me, about halfway done. I expect it to come out at the end of the year. So I hope your people check them out.
The thing is, you've talked about off and on, and in Twitter and everything, but the threats you get, as well as the accusations that you are trying to incite people to violence, and
dear.
But you have made the point here, and I think it needs to be made that when you talk about firearms, just as when I talk about them. Our founders, you look at the way James Madison talked about them, the firearms were for defense, and they were the ultimate defense. But they were the people's ultimate defense, I should say, against the tyranny. But that is a defensive use. Our first option, as you've highlighted, our first option is a lawful and much more peaceful option, which we exercised in November 2016 in order to put Donald Trump in office instead of Hillary, and literally to choose between daylight and dark there, we chose daylight. And I think it's important for people to understand that's what we both desire for America. No one is talking about, when people accuse you of wanting to do this and that with guns, they're nutty. They're just nutty.
Yeah, they're just lying. Having weapons decentralized among the American people is sort of like knowing CPR. Now, I know CPR, but I've never had to use it. And, if somebody has a cold, I'm not going to start pressing on their chest.
Right.
But when you need it, you need it. Look, all the answers are there in the Constitution.
Right.
They're right there. The ability to vote for representatives and for a president, the ability to petition our government, to demonstrate, to speak out, to make our voices heard, to use the courts properly to vindicate our rights. Those are the means we intend to use to get our freedom. I talk about that a lot in Militant Normals. The situation where the decentralized possession of firearms by the American people comes into play is when that's all gone, when you have a government that is not respecting the right to free speech, not respecting the right to the freedom of religion, going house to house, murdering people to take firearms, not allowing people to vote, not representing them, putting them in camps for saying things that they're not supposed to be saying. It is entirely contingent on the Constitution falling apart by bad people in power.
Right.
That is the only time it might potentially be a moral choice.
Right.
And it is so rare. It's happened only once in our history, in 1775 at Lexington and Concord. And that was before our country even came into being.
Right.
Last ditch, apocalypse, a plague of frogs time.
You mean people with muskets beat the world's strongest military? I didn't think that was possible.
I know, it's kooky, right? Decentralized units of small arms insurgents providing a problem to a powerful military. That's never happened in Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam. Wait a minute, did somebody say something?
Right. I'm watching with Trump in office. I'm thinking about Reagan, and you just made me think of it. But do you ever notice these hippies and freaks get a free run, as they did under Reagan and now under Trump, because the stability of our country allows them to be freaks and hippies right now. They don't even know it, but they are living the fruit of Donald Trump's labor. They are the fruit of that labor, and they don't even know it.
Exactly. The freedom that they have and take for granted was bought and paid for by better men and women than they will ever be.
Right.
And I think a large part of the hatred, and it is hatred, you've seen it on social media. That's one of the beautiful things about social media. It illuminates what they really think about us. A lot of that hatred is based on the fact that they know that they've done nothing, that they are nothing, they've contributed nothing. And the thing is, It doesn't have to be that way. They can come around. They can come around and accept our Constitution, understand the founders' wisdom, realize that everybody's got these inalienable rights that they were born with, that they were created with, and that need to be respected. They can come around. I still have hope because we're selling the greatest society, the greatest that has provided more prosperity and justice than any other society in human history. That's what we're selling.
Right.
Are these guys just too dumb to buy?
Right. Or as you say, just do they need to be persuaded? I think some of them are too ideological to buy, but I think there are plenty of them who just need to be pulled away from that group they're with and spoken to in kind words with plain truth. And they may have never heard the plain truth before. A
lot of them have not heard it, and that's, you're seeing kind of the walk-away phenomenon,
right,
where people who you would never, we're all told that you would never expect. People who are not Anglo-Saxon Protestants, people who are not, guys like us. We're older white guys with guns. We're the stereotype, and straight, but. What about a young black kid from the inner city who suddenly realizes maybe he's being misled by the Democrats, and maybe he's got the abilities to go out and make a success for himself using in a system that doesn't look at your color and allows you to act economically to make your dreams come true.
Right.
The Constitution's for guys like you and me, but it's also for everybody else.
That's right. That's exactly right. We've seen one of the greatest booms in concealed carry in the last few years is in the black community, and it's particularly among black women. And I think,
Good.
of CNN will never report that. MSNBC will never report it, but it's still the truth, and that's the kind of truth we need to share because those women have realized they're single moms at home alone or single moms at home with their kid. A baseball bat's not enough. They need a Second Amendment, and they realize that finally.
Exactly. Here's the thing. Here is the irony. You have all these liberals out there telling us we're racist, sexist, and all that. But who are the guys who are saying, I want black women to decide if and how they defend themselves? It's you and me.
Right.
We're the guys saying they can choose. They're Americans. They're adults. They are perfectly capable of making those decisions for themselves. I won't presume to tell them. Liberals do.
Right.
Who's the racist?
I'm with you.
Who's the sexist?
Kurt, I know you're busy. You took time out of writing, and man, I appreciate you joining us. And listeners, look up Kurt on Town Hall, see him on Fox, and go to Amazon and look up his books and pre-order his new book. But Kurt, thanks for making time, man. You've got so much to say, and we loved having you on.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Folks, you've been listening to Bulls with AWR Hawkins. We'll be back right after this.
Breitbart News Tonight with Joel Pollack and Rebecca Mansour.
A lot of people not knowing what action they could or should take to make the difference. What I do is try to turn people on to sites like Breitbart, people who are writing and publishing the truth so that people will get educated. But, you kind of can't blame productive members of society who are kind of confused, perplexed as to what do we do to take this government back.
Sirius XM Patriot, Channel 125.
This is Bullets with AWR Hawkins, a Breitbart.com podcast. Here once again is AWR Hawkins.
Folks, welcome back to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. I can only say one thing. I love me some Kurt Schlichter. I'm not kidding. And I love the way he puts it, the way it needs to be put. Folks, we got a lot of Second Amendment in action stories I need to run through to close this podcast, all right? Number one, we had a woman in Jefferson County, Alabama. Her estranged husband allegedly tried to sexually assault her, breaks into her home, so she shoots him. Folks, I've said it before. See, the thing women do with a firearm, they not only defend their lives, but they defend their dignity. And that's what this woman did. And this story is brought to you by the Second Amendment. We had a carjacker in Colorado who he's driving around in a car randomly shooting out a window at passing cars as he goes up Pikes Peak, or the Pikes Peak area there by Colorado Springs. He gets up to a campground, he gets out of the vehicle, and he's swinging the rifle apparently. and he points the rifle at a legally armed citizen who happens to be a camper. Points the rifle at that legally armed citizen. He gets shot multiple times. Folks, this is how it's supposed to work. You're a criminal. You get reckless with your firearm. You're trying to prove how big and bad you are, and you're swinging that gun around, and you point it at a lawfully armed citizen, and that citizen puts it on you. Shoots you repeatedly. Folks, this story is brought to you by the Second Amendment. Now, folks, we had an unbelievable story. Unbelievable story out of Milwaukee. We had video, surveillance video, of a guy. He's a big old boy. I'd put him about 230, 240. 6 foot, 6'2", something like that. He's not happy with his food order, so he walks around behind the counter at this restaurant. There's a female cook, and about the time she starts to turn to look at him, he punches her with all the force he can muster in the temple. I have no idea how she stayed on her feet, none. Except maybe pure adrenaline and fear. She stayed on her feet and was able to get out of that kitchen. She turns a corner and she gets off camera. And he goes after her. He's going toward her. And another female employee pulls a gun and sticks it up in his grill. And he stops. Somehow she didn't shoot him. And he walks off camera. But she stopped the attack with a firearm. There is no telling what he would have done to that woman if he could have gotten to her. But the attack was stopped because another employee was armed. Folks, this story is brought to you by the Second Amendment. Folks, on July 4th, a mother was in a Shell station. She came out, and she saw a guy getting in her car to take off. Now listen, 2 toddlers were in that car. So the car's moving. The mother jumps in it. She begs the guy to stop. He won't stop, so she opens a compartment. I still haven't figured out if it was the glove compartment or the console, but she opens that whatever it is. She grabs her gun. She shoots him in the head. He wrecks, but guess what? The toddlers are safe. Folks, this story is brought to you by the Second Amendment. Now, in the midst of all of these stories, Gabby Giffords and her little group, they tweet that self-defense gun usage is a quote-unquote myth. It's a myth. That's weird. I thought I just told you a bunch of stories and that they were brought to you by the Second Amendment. Folks, Gabby Giffords, she's like Jackson Brown in the 70s, running on empty. They just throw out whatever they have to throw out. They realize they're losing. They really are. Now, the media won't let you know that, but they really are. And when I say media, I mean the establishment media. The usual losers, CNN, MSNBC, Chuck Todd, all that bunch. They're losing the gun argument. Guns are used for self-defense constantly. And I just listed 4 for you prior to mentioning Gabby Giffords. Folks, all of these stories of citizens saving their lives and the lives of others and the lives of their toddlers and women protecting not only their lives but their dignity, all these stories are brought to you by the Second Amendment. Folks, you've been listening to Bullets with AWR Hawkins. Be sure you get on iTunes and subscribe. And after you subscribe and you've listened a while, go back to that main page for the podcast and give us some reviews. We need all the 5-star reviews we can get. It's free to subscribe. Podcast will download to your phone every Tuesday. Have your friends, your coworkers, your family members, have them all subscribe. Have the person that you're in line with at Walmart subscribe. Let's build up our base here. Folks, until we talk again, always remember, more guns equal more freedom. Hey folks, I want to tell you about Breitbart News' Second Amendment newsletter, Downrange with AWR Hawkins. Features the top gun stories of the week every week, and guest columnists like Gun Owners of America's Larry Pratt or Armed American Radio's Mark Walters. Also features a review of a firearm or a firearm accessory each week. The newsletter downloads on Thursday, comes right to your email inbox. You can subscribe at Breitbart.com/AWR.